Okay, we see it.
Okay. Do you see my screen now? The presentation. I'm in presentation mode.
Yes.
Okay. Shall I start?
Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, so this is the agenda for today. So I was planning to start from some introduction about the membership service providers. You can tell me if you please tell me if you want me to skip some parts of it. I mean, it's the standard things, but I think it's good to set terminology and context. And then I will talk about the Jira item related to the distinguish of MSP identity types. And finally, I will talk also about the MSP refactoring. We also plan to talk about, and this will Mattia will tell about this, about another Jira item that is related to the update of the local MSP. Okay, so this is just the introduction. Let's start with the general concept about the membership service provider. As you know, it's one of the most pervasive components in the Fabric. It is the one that governs the identity infrastructures and the digital signatures. I like to think about it like the public office that issues passports, and then the equivalent of the signatures in the digital world. So it's the Fabric component that handles all this stuff. The picture is more complex than that. Everything is based on all the crypto operations are done by the BCCSP, the blockchain crypto service provider, and on top of the membership architectures, we also have a language that allows us to reason about identities. And indeed, we will touch the membership architecture and also the policy language, enhancing it to support to achieve the goal that we want to achieve. I think I can skip this. This is just what is the standard the standard MSP implementation that we provide in Fabric is the one based on PKI standards. So an identity is just as you know an X509 certificate. Signatures are right now ACDSA signatures, but there is a partial support also for RSA keys, and then we have all the hierarchy governed by, the classical standard, by the PKI standard. So you can have you must have at least one root CA, and then you can have multiple intermediate CAs issuing certificates. This is, for instance, just an example of two examples of MSPs. On the left-hand side, you have a very classical one. So you have the root certificate. You have a few intermediate CAs, and then one or multiple CAs can issue identities, so can certify certificates for identities in the system. On the right-hand side, actually, you have a more complex setting where we say, okay, given a certain identity, given a certain intermediate authority, we will consider valid MSP identities signed by this authority only if they have a certain OU, organizational unit identifier in it. Actually, this is also relevant to the change to the Jira item we want to present today, because we will modify, we will leverage in a sense the OUs to be able to differentiate between clients, peers, and orderers. As I said before, so the MSP it's a very interesting. So on top of the MSP, we built Fabric provides also a language in order to reason about identities. So you can have policies that, for example, says that only administrators only administrators from a certain companies or administrators from another companies can perform a certain operation. And as you know, this is very pervasive in all Fabric. So we have policies for this to instantiate a chain code, policies for invoking a chain code, or just for the reconfiguration. So at each operation there will be a wall, and this wall will be governed by a policy defined on top of the MSPs. So this is just to set the stage. I think we can start now with the main topic, which is the Jira item related to this ability to distinguish MSP identity types. So the FAB is 5664, and the problem is essentially the following. So right now, it's almost not possible to tell apart clients from peers from orderers. The only thing that you can do is to have a specialized MSP, so you can have an MSP that you internally understand as the one that generates certificates from the clients. You can have another MSP for the peers, but this is it's pretty complex. It's not clearly defined or force the use of the force the identity of a certain node coming to the participant in the network. So we won't have. So what happens now, for example, is you can have, if you have a policy for if you have an endorsement policy that says any two members of this, or for example, any member of a certain organization can sign this endorsement. Actually, what happens in practice now is that even a client can sign an endorsement, can fake it, and produce a valid endorsement. So we want to have an ability in this context to say that only peers or only nodes that are identified in the network as peers should be able to sign an endorsement. The solution is that we suggested is to leverage actually.
Please, can we ask a question? I'm sorry. Are we allowed to ask
questions?
Yes, please,
go ahead.
Why do I care?
You might care, for example, because I mean, as I said before, for the endorsement policy, you might want to restrict exactly who can perform this endorsement, not pretend. I mean, if you allow clients to do, what can happen? That the clients can collude by themselves, and then they can make something. They can make that a transaction has been endorsed correctly when it's not. Actually, when the proper endorser not even received the proposal. The proposal to execute the chain code. So it's to have these other mechanisms to protect an endorsement, for example. Or you might even for the ordering service, so you might pretend, hey, I want to make sure that this block has been signed only by proper endorser in this organization, and not by any node in this organization.
But how would we stop people from just acting like they're a peer when they're not really a peer? It seems like we're just pushing.
They can they're totally fine. They can act as a peer, but then when the committing peer that will receive a block or receive and then check a transaction on that block, the first thing that he will check and say, or if the policy demands that, he will say, okay, let me make sure that this guy who signs the endorsement is a peer, because if it's not a peer, I will reject immediately this transaction. Or for the block, let me check who signed this block. If it's not an orderer that signed this block, I will just reject the block.
Again, I guess my question is, how do I stop people from acting like there's something they're not? That's the part I guess I'm trying.
You cannot do it, because a malicious node can do whatever he wants.
Well, then I know. Then isn't this? What's the difference between protecting your certificate distribution versus allowing somebody to basically saying you got to say you're this type? I mean, if they're, you know what I mean?
No. Hang on, Jeff. You can. No, but you can control this. Let's take the simplest example. Let's take the simplest example of a client versus a peer. That's the easiest one, right? Okay. So there's going to be somebody who issues, there will be an issuer of certificates for an organization, right?
Yeah.
So that issuer can control whether it gives client certificates or peer certificates. That's how you control that. Today you can't.
But wouldn't that, explain to me how that's different than saying that the certificate on the endorsement policy does not represent the concept of a peer action? And wouldn't you just put a different policy on the endorsement policy that would not allow this behavior? Meaning the cert that you give to a client does not meet the endorsement policy.
No.
But allows for...
Well, you're right. You're saying, so I guess there's an alternative that could have been that you could try to define an organization. I mean, it gets more complicated. The only way you could possibly do this is try to figure out how to define some type of organization, and then eventually when we get to all these different types of enforcement policies, that you could try to limit it. But I think there's still even a hole in there if I remember looking through all of it. The bottom line comes down to today. If I get in, let me give you here's a concrete example. If I go to the Fabric CA today and I get a certificate for my organization, I can use that certificate for any role in the network. Well, any role in my org, right? So for a peer or a client. That means that my client can connect to gossip, it can do everything else, right? Because, remember, we moved to a model which is turning out to be kind of a pain, for workload management, fault tolerance, whatever, and not requiring you to register every peer, like we do in v0.6, for example, that everything is based on the org, right? So we don't really identify you as a peer or anything like that. We just identify you as a member of the org. But now if you move to a model and you say the policy, now the endorsement policy would be, it requires, 5 signatures from org.peer, right? So the endorsement policy is, org1. I'm sure you're going to show this, right? Org1. Oh yeah. Am I taking your thunder?
Go.
org1.msp peer, org2.msp.peer, right? So the certificate, when I registered users, I will be in control of my organization. I will determine which identities will be peer identities. It could be peer 1, peer 2, peer 3. And we're actually adding the implementability in the Fabric CA to actually do this, right, that it'll actually generate these OUs as well. So now you're guaranteed that you give the right crypto material to your peers. And now we have endorsement policies that look like this. And then we give the right material to our clients, right? Now, a client doesn't meet this endorsement policy, right? So that means that a client can't just synthesize a transaction and sign it. So I'm not sure what we're sort of missing here. This does actually work to prevent it.
My assumption is that you can do this in the context of today. We could have place a separate endorsement certificate policy. In the endorsement policy, we could have specified a different representation of what we accept.
But Jeff, that's okay. There are multiple ways to do that. The point is to be as flexible as possible because we are not forcing clients to use Fabric CA or to be able or to say that no, you have the right to specify the certificate.
But it sounds like we're not solving the problem because you're telling me by introducing these types, someone could still act like a different type.
You can't.
No, you can't because your identity, your credential that you get from the certification authority will limit you.
Right, you can't.
Okay.
Hey, I have a question.
So Jeff, today we have MSP principal roles, and we have 2 of them.
Yeah.
One is admin and one is member. And a member is any valid certificate issued by the CA, and admins are explicitly enumerated. Yeah. So all we're doing is we're adding 3 new role types, which are differentiated based on OUs, which you can't forge. That's it.
Under the assumption that CA is trusted or is well behaving.
And we modify the Fabric CA.
So maybe I'm misreading this. I saw this as defined as MSP types, but we were basically talking about those identity types. We're adding new types of identities associated.
We're adding new roles.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but
sorry.
That's
this is not a new MSP.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I thought we were trying to introduce the new concept of an MSP type, and I was like, oh, God. Okay, nope, then I apologize. That's what I was trying to understand.
Okay, sometimes words that's my fault. Sorry, Jeff.
Nope. Okay, continue. I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Angelo.
Yes, please.
So a small question. So all of this was implemented in the BCCSP MSP, correct? So if now we have, for example, IDMX, so you need to associate the IDMX identities into either one of the principal types, one of the roles, or to all of them, right?
So the IDMX requires some modifications. We already started the discussion with Maria and so they already releasing when the generator. What is happening?
It's related to the one they did yesterday. Did you attend yesterday?
There is someone speaking.
So these are at 10 a.m.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It sounds like Brett, but I'm guessing.
It's not mandatory. I did.
Good, right? I mean, it's just going to
So,
become...
So anyway, Jacob, we need a small modification in IDMX to have the ability to have additional organizational units, but I mean they will be very the same. Nothing very different needs to be done.
Yeah. So what I'm wondering is, was it possible to implement it on top of the MSP? For example, if you every identity tells you what its OU is, and then you implement on top somehow. Just wondering.
Yeah, this is what we do actually, because an MSP identity, as you know, has already this method that gives back the get organization, the organizational unit. So we are just leveraging that.
But it is implemented in the BCCSP MSP. So I was just wondering if it was possible, to add some small layer between the MSP and the actual MSP provider or something. Never mind, carry on.
Oh, yeah. Like the cache layer that we have done. Yeah, that's also done. That's also doable.
Yeah.
But there's not a direct mapping between the role type of. We could choose later on to add a different way of, besides for OU, even for the current X509 one, if we wanted to add attributes to map that to the OU role, right? So at the MSP layer, right, we've defined these as roles in there, and then it's up to the provider to define, how it's going to map whatever it wants to in that and answer yes, no as to whether you have that type of identity. All right.
Okay, I see.
But if we base on the organizational units, Jacob is right. We can have a common layer between the BCCSP based and the IDMX based.
No, but actually, what Gary says makes sense, because we can just say, for example, every IDMX identity is strictly a client, for example.
That's why in the future we will use IDMX also for the endorsement for everything.
But the important thing why we use the OUs and the roles is to hide away the complexity of figuring out which OU is used on that MSP for client and which OU is used for that other MSP for peers. And this is the idea. So essentially, you don't need to extract the OUs from an identity is a member of and then do the management external to the MSP.
Okay. Let me speed up so we give also Matthias a chance to talk. So this is just the way the configuration is done at the MSPs. So there is a way to identify to specify out which is the organizational unit for clients, for peers, for orders. And then there's also a way to set the certification chain. So you can even say it not only has to have this particular the OU, but it needs to have it needs to be recognized through this organizational chain, because you can have an MSP with multiple intermediate CAs inside. So you might want also to specify that point. Then with this modification, we say that an identity is valid if it carries at least, or not at least, at most, not even at most, one and only one of the above system OUs. It needs to be at least it needs to be a client or a peer or an order. If it's neither of these, it will the identity will just be rejected. So as Gary was saying before, then we can have policies like the following for an endorsement policies, where we explicitly say, hey, we are satisfied if one of these two organizations, one of these peers coming from these two organizations sign the endorsement. And the same thing you can have for you can then use also the new roles based principal types to map different things. For example, you can say that to a channel only client, some transaction can be submitted only by clients or other stuff like that.
Angelo,
if you don't have a question, I will move to the next step. Yeah, please.
Angelo, I do. This is Keith. Could you go back to one slide more?
This one.
Yeah. This makes. So in the future, if we did want to support something other than OU, it would be nice to not make this so OU centric, and keep it. I mean, I think in just language that is not. For example, call it node, I don't know, node condition or node something.
Yeah.
And then the organizational unit identifier would simply be a predicate, a condition.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I will in this new change set that I will submit to support expression for the organizational unit identifier. Yeah, I might rename also this this field to make it more generic. So you can in this expression you can even say let me say I will accept only I identify this as a client. This the common name contains this prefix. Then you can be even more fancier. Yeah.
Yep. Or the distinguished name is the full thing. Yep.
Again, I'm going to ask probably a dumb question, Slow, and I'm sorry. What problem do we think we're stopping with this at the highest level? And I heard you say
peers and clients masquerading as peers.
But again,
there are a number of things in the system which should only be able to be done by peer identity. We're not going to be able to enforce all of them on day one, but we can with policies. For example, we should actually be able to set a policy on gossip that it can only be accessed by peers, for example. Not doing that today, but we should be able to start doing that as we move forward, right? There's a number of things that only peers should be able to do and not clients.
Why?
Because a client isn't a peer.
But why do we care? Because for an endorsement, right, that's organization.
We're leaking a lot of information.
We're leaking a lot of information.
Right, if I can now have a policy between, right, a peer can be the person, well, a few things. A peer should be the only thing who provides an endorsement, right? Because a peer is the only thing that's supposed to be, or I should say a peer identity.
Yeah.
And, of course, you have to say that someone didn't take that peer identity, but that's a different problem.
Okay.
Right? But the peer is the one who runs the endorsement code, the endorsement logic, everything like that, right? Peers are the ones, so that's number one, right? A client, you shouldn't be able to use a certificate issued to an end user shouldn't be able to do that, which it can happen today. I would go even further that we have potential interfaces that we have today for even, not that we're getting there in 1.1, but we can do this in 1.2 and later, like even on the gossip stuff or other intercommunication protocols, right? There are a number of things where it should only be peers that are allowed to do that. Right now, everything is fundamentally based on really the org and an admin versus a member.
I see what you're saying for the role, but I guess my concern is that I thought we were always operating under that we all understood this was true, and only by requiring multiple organizations could you navigate that existing issue, which I thought was just accepted.
No, I think that's a different issue, right? I think the problem today is just basically, right, you should be able to look, we went with a model that allowed you we did a good thing and maybe a bad thing, right? The good thing that we did is we don't require you to explicitly identify your peers. That's also a bad thing because that means that anybody in your org can masquerade around as a peer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
so
it's up to
by moving to this model, we now give you some semblance of control of basically differentiating the identities that you're issuing certificates to.
But okay, so I'm going to make a statement and tell me if you think it's true. If an organization were to have correct policies with respect to doling out certificates, this issue could be completely controlled at an organizational level by the organization.
No. But what do you mean?
Today? You mean in today's implementation? No.
Yeah.
It can't be controlled today.
It cannot. Okay, so is this stated as an, you know what I'm saying? I've never heard this issue stated as a defect or anything at this moment.
No, I don't doubt because we went with the assertion. Oh, go ahead, Angela. Sorry.
No, that's fine. No,
it has to be. Right?
There is Jeff. If you meant that if there was a way to specify the exact MSP identity of a node in the network, this in theory you can do that. If you have to take an MSP identity, the serialization and MSP identity, and then you have to explicitly in the policy you have to say it needs to be this certificate, it needs to be this identity, it needs to be this other identity.
Okay, so we're saying there is not a practical way you could, in today's current implementation, an organization that was incredibly disciplined and controlled still would have an issue that it cannot be assured that people in its organization are not acting as endorsers behind their backs.
The only way is that you have to exactly point to the MSP identities, right? If you say, hey, only this specific node or better, only this MSP identity can produce a valid endorsement, and you specify the serialized version of the MSP identity, of course you are limiting this, but you are also putting a lot of burden on the network administrator that then he has to clearly identify which net.
Right. So what we are doing here is not fixing a problem that if they were not disciplined, controlled, and managed the burden could not manage themselves. We are attempting to reduce the burden on the organization.
Okay. Put whatever it is. I mean, you can put it in multiple ways, I guess.
I don't think
because
we can
we're going to have to communicate why we're doing this, right? We're going to have to communicate why
it cannot be solved.
I don't think it can be solved today either because right now we're adding a new ability. We have full trust. Right now, the whole model is basically you're all in at an org or all out on an org.
Exactly.
And that's the trust model and trust assumptions. Okay, that we made in 1.0. We see that there are some additional ones, right, where we do need to differentiate and distinguish a client from a peer. Moving forward, we definitely need to be able to do this. Moving forward with other kinds of identity providers, we may need to do this. So we are solving, so we're adding, we gave you an issue that this does solve, right? But it's not an issue in the sense that it wasn't included in the model, but we see it as a gap where people actually do have an issue with that. And we do also see the notion that we really don't have the ability to identify who's supposed to be a client.
So in this new model, my assumption would be then it's a validation
better example here.
So my assumption is then only at the validation layer would we be able to determine this, right? The peer would then, I assume, check for the role of any endorsements, and they must all meet the peer role. Is that close?
Anytime you evaluate the policy, it's a good time to evaluate also the node type.
Yeah, Jeff, this is just giving the MSP a way to differentiate between these roles, and you use those roles in your policies how it makes sense.
Well, my assumption is we're
today,
going to
remember,
put this on
if you want.
Okay. Well, my assumption is this is going to impact anybody who connects to a peer, because my assumption is going to be now that we're going to assume somehow we're either going to put a gate on the peer that verifies the requester has the role of client now on an endorsement. No?
We should. But we're not going to change any of our defaults.
Yep.
We can't, right?
Okay.
So I think basically for this to work, right, we have to bring a channel up to capability of 1.1. The only thing you could potentially shut down with this would be if we had like the QSCC and config CC, but I don't think we're going to get that far in 1.1 anyway. Technically, you could lock those down individual on your peer, but that doesn't screw anybody. That's just.
So Jeff, I also have it running. So I have prepared an end-to-end that has all these things. It shows, for example, the failure on endorsement policy because our client tries to sign the endorsement, and I also have the example where someone that is not a client tries to send a proposal to a peer and is rejected because it's not a client.
That's what I was wondering. Okay, so there is going to be a new constraint, I would assume. That was my question, that there is now an additional constraint on the endorsement process.
You can put it. I mean, you can specify in your policy. It's up to you. You can still use the member.
Instead of typing, what you would have normally typed today is org1 MSP
role member. Yeah, it would have been member, right? Understood. Okay, now I understand.
They are still there. We are not removing them.
Okay, I understand now. So the assumption being then, this gives an organization a semblance of confidence that people are not, because they've been given some identity as a member of the organization, they're not manufacturing proposals.
Yeah.
I mean, excuse me, endorsement response. I guess proposal response. And then trying to marry that with some other colluder or something. I understand. Okay, I think I understand.
Yeah, there's something please, can you put on mute? No. Okay. That's good.
So can I add another comment?
Yes.
Would be consideration to customers in the future who may need to distinguish between different client types. For example, an end user from an application. That means we're going to have to add a new.
I don't know, we can take note. I mean, and then see.
Yeah. Now, I assume another way that could actually be done today is, and perhaps a ridiculous manner, is you could have just used the identity cert type, right, and put a hard code cert, right, if an organization is currently concerned about this.
Or you could have used the OU support, which is effectively how this is implemented, but it's burdensome, and this is something a lot of people want to differentiate, so we're adding these as roles to make it easier.
Yep.
Understood. Okay.
Okay, let's move on, please. So this is another Jira item. Actually, it's not yet a Jira item, but there is a design document. I put the links on this slide to the design document. We would like to refactor the MSP interfaces to better handle the identity expiration and to have also to enhance also the policy evaluation framework. So our proposal is the following. This is a joint work, actually. You will see all the names in the proposal, in the design document. So what we propose.
Can I ask one more question here, Angelo, right before you go?
Yes, please.
Is what you're getting ready to discuss, who would be impacted from what you're getting ready to discuss? Meaning, is this solely isolated to the internals of a peer and order implementation, and no one as a user would probably be aware of the impact of this?
You mean the previous one or this one? This one, the MSP refactoring.
This one.
It's all internal. I mean, it's just an internal processing. This will not, the client will not be affected by this.
Okay, so we would assume, so there would be no difference from a user's perspective or configuration perspective given this implementation. We won't be breaking anybody.
No, not anybody, given also that no one is using the MSP at the chain codes, I guess. No one is importing the MSP there, I guess.
Not in the case of
the
standard MSP. So we won't introduce any changes to the signing MSP of the clients for the standard MSP, but for the identity mixer we might need to. Because we might need to tell the signer MSP to reveal the fact that I'm peer, for example.
That's no, but this is for the refactoring, sorry.
Yeah, the refactoring refers only to the standard MSP.
So after refactoring, if I do not add or bother to add any concept of an OU or intermediate, I'm still good to go.
They are orthogonal. These two change sets are orthogonal.
No, I understand orthogonal, but after both of these...
Or if you want these 2 points, distinguish MSP identity types and MSP refactoring are orthogonal.
No, I understand that, but do either of these require me to do any X509 stuff that I perhaps have not done yet to this date? Meaning
nothing more. No, you don't have to change. You don't have to change the way the certificates are issued, the way you talk with Fabric CA or any other...
change your policies, nothing.
Yeah, that's for the refactoring itself. It will affect other things. I mean, it will affect other things or the way the transactions are validated or these kind of things. But
and again, in a nutshell, we would term this as you're getting better, fine-grained, less onerous control within your own organization. That's sort of the big value.
Actually, they also are the thing. I mean, this proposal will not affect immediately the way we will not say now that we handle identity expiration. So we are proposing how to change MSP to handle also identity expiration. Of course, when identity expiration will come in, meaning that the Fabric has a notion of time, and with respect to this notion, there is a way to say if an identity is expired, that this will have an impact on the system, because now, for example, a client needs to regenerate a certificate if it's expired, right? So this it's an additional workflow that the client has to put in. Right now, we are saying that the identity is never expired; they can only be revoked, and then only after revocation, the client might need to ask a new certificate to the CA, for example.
So am I to infer from this that currently, if your certificate were to expire, the system would not behave in the expected manner, meaning it would just continue processing?
Depends on what expected means. From our perspective,
meaning I would expect if I would have assumed if a cert expired that anybody who attempted to use it would have failed in some mechanism, meaning either through endorsement or submission.
Yeah.
Is that not true today? Meaning, is this being done to fix a current deficiency versus this is added value? Because it reads as it's added value, right? But is that true? Meaning, do we have an issue currently if your cert expires? Does the system not behave in the way I would have assumed, which is it would have rejected stuff?
It does not.
Right now, Fabric V1, even 1.1, that does not care about expiration. So even if the certificate says that this will expire tomorrow, Fabric will not take care of that.
Yeah, in my mind, the wording to say that this is some kind of added value in my mind should probably be more addressed as to fix a deficiency, right? Just so people understand why. You know what I mean? Because, you know what I mean? For upgrade purposes, this is not a non-trivial thing to me. This is actually very important. I would have assumed that expired certs would have caused an issue, and the fact that they're not would kind of be disconcerting.
Jeff, yeah, I think we realize that we need to allow certs to expire. This is going to discuss some other changes that we're going to make to the API while we do that, because we recognize some other things that we would like to enhance.
Yeah. Yeah, but before reaching that point that we're going to activate that flag that says now identity expires, we need to first achieve an agreement on a notion of time in Fabric, whatever it is, right? So, and we are not there yet. So we could, yeah, we are not.
But we could handle, like, for example, if someone tries to connect, we can make sure that it's in there. If a peer boots up with an expired certificate, we could have it, fault. We could not sign with expired certificates. So there's a bunch of things that we could do with expired certificates that don't affect determinism in the system.
That's for gossip, for example. I guess Yakov is handling already.
Yes,
but for example, when a peer starts up, so in case you didn't know, so there was a CI failure this weekend, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I proposed it to.
I had a fun time fixing all those. People using expired certificates all over the place. But no, it turned out, right, that, but it would have been interesting, right, but where Yakov and I came up with, what Yakov really asked about was like, well, why, it was crashing because Gossip was basically panicking because it was getting a null identity. But it should be, right, that a peer, anyway, we should just wasting time on this conversation. I think that there's something that we could do.
That actually would be a nice thing to, for, I think, everybody to understand. I thought that it didn't, I thought we could tolerate checking for expiration during endorsement, but the only time you couldn't is during commitment. So can we?
You're correct. We should, let's just table this for now, but yes, there are places that we can do this, and I think this is going to be part of when you talk about this function and how we deal with this anyway. But yeah, you're right, Keith. There's places that we could start to force people to do that, right? You can. Don't allow signing with an expired certificate. Don't boot up and load an MSP with a. But it depends on the places that you do it.
I guess my concern is that the title of this topic is MSP Component Refactoring, when in my mind it really should be Fix Expired Certificate Issue.
I don't think that's what.
No, we are not able to. We are not discussing here the notion of time for Fabric.
We're not.
That's the thing. I'm only proposing how we want to change the MSP API to be able then, once the notion of time is fixed, to be able to quickly update, to quickly have Fabric working. That's the only thing. So we are not discussing here the notion of time. Indeed, the proposal is something like this: is to have the MSP identity split in two. So we still have an identity that is just the representation in the system of a deserialized identity. So it's an intermediate object between the bytes representation of the MSP identity and what it means to have a validated identity with respect to some notion. It can be in absolute term, or it can be relative to a time frame that needs to be defined in some other Jira item. So then the float, for example, to validate a signature will be the following. So you take your serialized identity, you deserialize it, you get an identity. you validate it, and you get a validated identity, and only on validated identity you can start reasoning about verification of verifying a signature, or, for example, doing or evaluating a policy. This is what we want to have. So if you take
is
identity,
the expectation that validate may fail, Angelo?
Yeah, validate may fail because you can say, hey, please validate this identity with respect to this time frame, and then with respect to that time frame, the validation can fail because it might say, no, this is not valid
The
anymore.
default path is still going to, but this is only for advanced stuff in the future because right now you're going to have validate. That's still a normal. This is still the same. You've broken it apart, but we'll still have the same flow as we do today, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the same determinism.
Indeed.
Because we call validate, not validate at. And then we don't call it.
Yeah, but now verify will be, it's a method that is available only on validated identity. It will not, right. You will not have verify on the identity interface because at that point, if you have in your hands this object, you cannot handle it because you cannot verify any signature because it's not clear if it makes sense to verify a signature against something that might be an identity that might be invalid.
So maybe as a little bit of history, today the policy framework takes sets of signatures and evaluates whether they satisfy a policy. And that made sense in some sense, but really there are a number of places where we want to take a set of identities and validate a policy. Basically places where you already know who you're talking to and you don't want to re-verify that signature. And so this is restructuring to help facilitate that.
Indeed. Just to jump to what Jason was saying, so I can even closer give Matthias can talk about his Jira item. So this, if we change the MSP that way, then we will have a way on the policy objects to, for example, evaluate it against directly identities. Only against actually validated identities. So we don't have to revalidate an identity that we already know it's valid with respect to a certain time frame or in absolute terms, no matter what it is. Or we can even enhance the policy to say, please evaluate this signed data with respect to these options, and the options, I don't know, might contain something like a reference, a time reference, or some other information that would drive the policy evaluation.
Where would you be pulling those validated identities from, the cache or somewhere else?
For instance, this is already what we do because we have this cache layer, and we know that the identity never expires. So if we validate the first time, and that's exactly the same. But with the expiration,
can I ask a question?
I just
the thing you just discussed, was this done for efficiency?
The cache? Yes.
No.
The cache was done for efficiency.
No, and the question of adding this ability to validate, and instead of taking the policy, instead apply it directly to an identity. Was this an efficiency issue?
No, just as a use case for gossip. I mean, Jacob, I think, can tell more, because this is something really that Jacob kept telling us multiple times.
Angelo, but that's actually backwards, because what you're essentially saying that in order to verify a signature, I need to go through validate first, which is actually the opposite, because in gossip we first validate the identity, and we never verify. For example, so whenever something that you didn't mention is the satisfies principle, for example, and policy checks. So we never do policy checks on identities that have not been validated before. So you're saying now that, first, given a raw identity, you first validate it, it turns into a validated identity, and then you can check whether it satisfies principles, policies, whatever. But that's actually, I'd say, it will cause a certain inefficiency for gossip if we didn't have the cache layer that would cache the memorizations of the validate.
But now that cache has got to be smart enough to understand cert expiration. Given
it doesn't. No, it doesn't, because in gossip we have our own support of expirations. But basically, whenever an identity of a peer is added in the in-memory map, so we ask MSP when will that identity expire, and we open a timer and whenever it expires, we automatically delete it from the cache.
No, I understand. I understand gossip's taking care of that. My assumption is this is a global kind of concept, right, where everybody's going to go through this process.
You don't need because only gossip caches identities in memory, and for example, in the code path of endorsement, the identity gets into the system as a raw identity anyway, so it will get all of the steps anyway.
I guess my question is, are we going to have to call, my assumption is on every message, this validate identity is going to be called every time, correct? Not that that's a problem. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just trying to understand usage.
We solved that part of that problem with the cache already.
Right.
But yes, we validate every identity.
Okay, so again, when we say the cache, are we talking about a cache solely for gossip's purposes, or are we talking about the MSP cache?
An MSP has some layer between the BCC MSP and the MSP API, and only for the BCC MSP, because the IDMX MSP has pseudonyms which are random. So whenever you do either validate or satisfy its principle or deserialize identity, it goes through the BCP MSP cache, which is, of course, independent of the MSP type.
Understood. So in general, no one should reuse nor keep a handle to a validated identity ever.
There are a couple, like for instance, in the policy evaluation, we have the meta policies, which basically evaluate sub-policies. And in that case, we would probably, we would retain a reference for it, for that policy evaluation, but, that would be retaining the reference for milliseconds, right? I mean,
that's my point. Is basically it's done solely in the flow of the transaction. Once that is done, it is discarded, and only the BCCSP cache layer controls. Okay. As long as people are only, realize that they can only take it, use it, and they're done with it, and cannot reuse it. They can't cache it in any way.
Sure.
But actually, with those new things, you could cache it because you could actually call revalidate or whatever you actually needed.
Actually, yeah, I was saying the same. Actually, why not? I mean, you can keep this validated identity. The point is then to better understand with respect to which time frame. If at a later time you want to make sure that this validated identity is valid even with respect to another time frame, then you have to revalidate the identity. Right. So I would say it's more about the time frame. Because now we don't have a time frame, so the identities are valid. If they are valid forever, you can absolutely cache. Once you validate this identity, then it's clear that it will be valid. And in particular, the point is why it cannot work. Let's suppose that the MSP, an identity is revoked. So right now, this means that there will be issued a reconfiguration of the channel, updating the MSP, saying this identity has been revoked. Yeah. Now, if we keep that reference, that we have to
with the old MSP instance.
Yeah.
It will not be valid anymore, right?
Yeah. My assumption is the only issue associated with getting a valid identity at every point is just efficiency, right? It's
so
not.
The MSP will,
it's
for
not
sure
a correct.
Will not. If an identity gets revoked, and then on the new MSP, so the MSP gets refreshed because the channel is reupdated, and then you ask again to deserialize the identity and revalidate it, the MSP will correctly say, no, this is not valid anymore. Mm-hmm. But let's suppose that you keep a reference to an identity that's been validated with the previous MSP. That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the only place I know that has any business caching these is gossip. I'm not sure anywhere else in the peer or orderer who would do that. And I would just say as a blanket policy, don't cache these things.
Don't cache. Yeah, that's
outside. Only the MSP internally can decide how to cache.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should be explicit there. Basically, use it and it's done. And you got to get a new one.
Only Angelo can decide how to cache.
No, but it's a good point, Jeff. So we'll explicitly put in the comments of the method that this should not be cached outside.
But
that's perfect.
Wait, but what gossip caches is raw identities, which will go through the whole chain anyway.
Okay, then great. Then we don't have an exception to the rule.
Yes. So you are not caching already the identity instance, any instance of the identity interface.
Right. We cache bytes. That's all.
Pure doesn't use any of this anyway. I mean, all the rest of the code's all MSP. The policy you might a little bit in the VFCC, right? Well, on the newer interfaces there, but.
So and I get the other half of this, which is what originally kind of led me to push towards looking at this, is that for the policy evaluation, we have a bit of a problem today in that we don't really understand why a policy fails. In particular, if the identities in the signature set are valid in the channel and the signatures are valid, but they don't satisfy the policy, then we probably should tell the client, this is why you're not authorized. On the other hand, if the identities don't have valid signatures or they aren't valid within the channel, then we should really tell the client nothing because we don't want to leak any information about the configuration of the channel. And today, we really have no way to differentiate that while evaluating the policy. So by sort of splitting this into two steps, we can do sort of smarter error handling and disclose things to the client when it's appropriate.
So we're going to add...
Jason, so I think that in this specific thing, shouldn't we just return stuff like access denied whenever an error comes from the MSP layer? Because basically a client can use that to know which channels exist in the system, right?
Well, I was going to say, should it be access denied or should it be not found? Right? That if
it should be the same for both. Whichever one, it should be the same for both, and probably, I think that's because Jakob has the same thing on discovery. We should log the correct reason.
It's not a crypto issue. It's not a crypto issue that the side channel leaks you anything, so you can also return the real cost.
Well, I can just say, this was the good and the bad of it, right? So, when we did data power, right, if you got back-end errors, right, anything that wasn't an error, we just returned a generic error, right? Because we didn't want someone to know if they were attacking, on this stuff, that what was the error that happened on our back-end was an authorization error.
But how many times have you been trying to access a folder in box and you got access denied and you didn't know you actually don't get access denied, you get failure, right? So you don't know whether the link is wrong or whether you don't have permission.
Yeah, so as long as we give the same error, for both, I think it's fine.
I just want to say it's not a crypto issue. You're breaking the crypto by giving too much. Because if you do it inside the crypto.
Right. Oh yeah, I just think you should give the same error both times. Whichever error it is, I don't care. Access denied is fine, but I just think you shouldn't give two different errors, that's all.
Okay. I guess that surprises me a little bit. But
see, the thing that sucks is it's a consumability problem, but it's a better practice not to reveal. Because otherwise you could just be phishing, right?
Well, but if your org is in the channel and you have a valid identity with a valid signature, but maybe your identity isn't authorized to perform that operation, you would still say don't tell them that it's authorization denied. Just go with the not found or whatever it would be.
I guess you can't fish much.
I guess it depends on what kind of action you're taking, I suppose. Right. Like in Jakob's case, we were talking about service discovery on the sides. You could. Right, because you're going and querying for channels, right? So you could start sending queries in there, and right, whether you have access to it or whether it's not found, you don't want to. Maybe that's slightly different than this particular API, right? So I guess it's probably dependent on the thing. But so by the way, would you on this one? And I think we saw this, right? So we had one method that has an optional. So this is the same method. Evaluate on the second one, it's the same, but you can pass in options, but it's basically the same as. Yeah. But I guess we have to name these something different. Yeah. So unfortunately, we don't have overloaded operators in Go.
Oh, yeah.
I would still be in favor of simply having a function which would basically accept the signature set and the options and output the validated identity slice. So essentially, the pattern would be you call .evaluate and then just wrap your arguments in this function.
Anyway, there are comments on this this document, so feel free to comment and do whatever you want.
Okay, I got it.
And so we can decide what to do.
So you're saying we would.
So if you want to see, it's almost 5, but yeah, we have another item to discuss. I don't know, Dave, shall we continue? May we continue, or other 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like this? Okay, no, Matthias has to leave, so we'll update on next.
So since the guy who has to present has to leave,
yeah, but it's also 5, so we don't have much time. Okay. More questions?
What happened to Italy?
Wow, come on, please, no, let's not touch this argument.
Oh, you meant about this.
Well, last time it happened 1968. No, 58. Okay. We can just end. Okay. It's fine. Goodbye, everyone.
That was it.
Oh, not even Dave.